So here we are. We are continuing our history lesson that we started in the last video. This is recorded so that as many people as can are able to see what we talked about in history. Reminders, the Bible test will be when you come back. So study those Bible verses.
Okay.
Some people haven't said some verses, so if you don't tell them to me, some people may have a 0 for a quiz if they never said them. But if you come and say them, we can give you a grade.
Okay.
History, guess what? I'm going to go back to the page on page 139 in the history book. And we're going to review a little bit what was our last meeting and then go forward. Because there's something I'd like to read on page 139. Why was there these odds between Mexico and the United States? Well, here's what happened. In 1821, the country of Mexico fought and won her independence from Spain. At that time, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California were all part of Mexico. So think about that. Mexico actually was not just down here.
It was all Texas.
All this was considered part of Mexico. But something happened.
They got into a fight.
Yes.
There's just something about it that just like how did God just plan these fights? Like how they happen like all the time, or did everybody back then did not just like each other?
Well, here's what happened this time. Look what it says in your book on 139. It says the Mexican government was eager to have more settlers come to Texas. You know, the settlers mean the settlers in the United States. Mexico offered to sell land cheaply to Americans if they agreed to become Mexican citizens and obey Mexico's laws. Thousands of Americans accepted Mexico's offer. By 1834, there were more Americans in Texas than there were Mexicans. The Mexican government began to worry, what if the Americans try to take over Texas? As a result, Mexico decided to stop any more Americans from coming to Texas. Mexican soldiers were sent to guard the Texan border. Then the Mexican government tried to take away the freedoms of the Americans already in Texas. Well, you can imagine how freedom-loving Americans felt about that. That's why they feel like their rights are taken away as American citizens, but they are also considered Mexican citizens too. And they didn't want too many of them coming down there, but they felt like they had a right to be down there too. So conflict occurs between the Americans and the Mexicans. Now I'm going to read some of this because I think we have time, right? I'm going to reread some of what we already talked about in the last video. Remember Santa Anna? Who was Santa Anna, Joseph?
The government.
He was the leader of where?
Mexico.
Mexico. And he took complete control. He was actually a general, took complete control of Mexico. And he allowed the people no freedom. He's what you call a dictator. You know, the people have very little or no freedom. And finally, the Americans in Texas could take it no more. And in 1836, they declare war. They didn't quite get to war yet. I'm sorry, I said the wrong word there. But they declared, hey, this Texas, it's its own independent country. So the Americans are saying, Texas is its own country. It's not part of Mexico. They're just saying that. And we're free from Mexico's rule. And that's actually underlined in your book. So you want to highlight that on 139. Well, inside Texas is this old Spanish mission we talked about last time, where 187 men gathered and prepared to fight for their freedom. What was that place called?
The Alamo.
Yes, the Alamo. And one of the most famous of those Americans that fought, his name was?
Davy Crockett.
Yes, Davy Crockett. And why did Crockett go to Texas to fight, even though Texas was not part of the United States?
So he could win the battle for
And
America.
they wanted to be free. They wanted to be free. And he was willing to fight anywhere anyone wanted to be. Davy Crockett was all about freedom. Now he was up in Tennessee, actually. That's where his home state was.
He was a patriot.
But he was willing to go down there, that's right. And to do whatever it meant, even if it meant helping other people be free too. So he goes down there, left his home. And so he wrote this beautiful farewell poem when he left his home. It goes like this. The home I forsake where my offspring arose. The graves I forsake where my children repose. The home I redeemed from the savage and wild. The home I have loved as a father his child. The corn that I planted, the fields that I cleared, the flocks that I raised, and the cabin I reared. The wife of my bosom, farewell to ye all. In the land of the stranger I rise or I fall. He wrote that poem.
It's a nice poem.
He was pretty good at it, wasn't he?
Especially from Davy Crockett. He was pretty good.
Yeah.
I've seen the movie about it.
He wasn't afraid, was he?
No, he would do anything for his country.
He was brave. And so he had this motto, be always sure you're right, and then go ahead. And that was an interesting motto, wasn't it? It said, make sure you're absolutely right first. And then when you know you're right, just go ahead and do it. And so he fought bravely. In fact, he fought in the War of 1812.
When they burned the White House in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And that did happen in 1812.
Yes, it did. And so now he's fighting for Texas. And he went ahead. So here are these 3,000 soldiers. Mexican soldiers. And there's 187 of them against 3,000 soldiers. These odds didn't look too good, didn't they? So, but they actually fought for 11 days against these 3,000 soldiers, these 187 men. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yes.
But you know what? Finally, the Texans, they ran out of ammunition. They ran out of ammo at the Alamo. And so the ammo at the Alamo, they ran out. So finally, the Mexicans poured into the old mission. And that's what you're seeing here in the picture, where they fought. And look, see the picture there? And
yes,
they finally lost because there was no way when they rushed in. But they fought all the way to the death, and they would not give up. They did not give up. They died. Even Davy Crockett died in that battle. You know, it was the last thing he wrote in his diary, where you write things that happened to you. March 5th, pop, 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 boom, 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 throughout the day. No time for memorandums now. Go ahead. Liberty and independence forever. That was the last thing he wrote in his diary. Whoa. And so he and other men gave their lives for independence and freedom. And now we remember that phrase, remember the Alamo. It swept throughout Texas, and they were prepared to fight Santa Anna. Now, it didn't end there, though. There were other battles. That was just the end of that battle. So there was a Texas general named Sam Houston.
I know him. He
No.
was on a poster that said, "I want you to join the military." Is that right?
You're thinking of Uncle Sam, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
But Sam Houston was, yes, yeah, he's a character too. That's another story about that. So Sam Houston took his Mexican army by surprise at the Battle of San Jacinto. Say it, Joseph. The Battle.
San Jacinto.
Very good. I love to hear you say it. And so Santa Anna himself was actually captured along with the Mexican army, thanks to Sam Houston and the many other brave people. That's highlighted in your book too, highlighted. You should highlight it anyway. It's underlined in your book. Texas now considered herself a free nation. Notice they say free nation. It's considered themselves their own country for a while. So for a while, Texas was its own country. You ever think about that? Not just a state, another country. It was called Texas, was another country. And Sam Houston was elected president of the country, Texas. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And so Texas remained independent until 1845. So from, let's see, forget how many years that was, but in 1845, see, it was 1836 where they started declaring independent. So for a few years, it was its own country. But then finally in 1845, Texas became the 28th state of the United States, a large state too. Because if you think about it, it was like a whole country joining the United States. Then there's this war with Mexico. Now, Mexico would not recognize Texas as being independent, never recognized Texas as being independent. And so when Texas became a state, Mexico becomes bitter toward the United States. And then, so they're angry. So America's angry with Mexico, Mexico is angry, and they're quarreling about, you know what they're quarreling about? The boundary line. No, this is our part. No, this is your part. No, this is our part. And so there was this dispute over the boundary. And there is a river called the Rio Grande River. And
I know that.
You know about that?
Yes, I do.
Well, Texas claimed that the Rio Grande should be the western boundary, while Mexico claimed another boundary. It was in another spot, which would give them more land. Well, along comes another president in the United States. The next president's name is President James K. Polk. He sent an army to guard the Rio Grande boundary line that Texas claimed was hers. And see, here's actually a picture in your book of, see that? That's the river, see? And that would make a nice boundary. Other side of the river can be Mexico. And then the other side would be the United States, or Texas, part of the United States. So President James K. Polk sends Americans down there. Mexican claimed this land was theirs, attacked the American army for being on their land. And in the fight, some Americans were killed. The United States then declared war on Mexico. So now here's a war. And this was called the Mexican War. And it started in 1846 and lasted for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Well, but guess what? The United States won. The United States won. And then there was a treaty of peace. The Rio Grande was accepted as the border between Texas and Mexico. Mexico gave the United States a large area of land that makes up, guess what it makes up? It now makes up the states of California, Nevada, Utah, parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Colorado. That was a lot of land that was given to the United States, wasn't it?
It is. And just from looking at it, like from the map, it looks small. So that's just a lot of land.
It is. The United States paid Mexico $15 million
That's
for
a lot.
this piece of land, but think about how much they got.
Okay.
So now they have all of this, the United States, all of this. Because think California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, okay, and the others that we mentioned. Think about how much is the United States now.
That's a lot of money. You could buy a lot of things.
And again, it seems like a lot of money, and it is. But think about how much land how much would we pay for that much land now? More than $15 million. A lot. That's a lot of land. That's like buying a whole country, you know? Well, some time passes, a few years pass, and about 5 years later, you know what happens? In 1853, I think we got a snag.
You were frozen like 2 times.
I think that the internet did something there. So anyway, 5 years later, you know what happened?
It ended.
The United States buys some more land from Mexico.
Oh
And it was
gosh.
called the Gadsden Purchase. And here's why. What happened was the very southern part of New Mexico and Arizona, what's now New Mexico and Arizona, was Mexico, but we got a little bit more in the United States. One reason for this was the building of a railroad that went down there. So what happened was this. See, here's the map. Look,
The
see this part down here?
Yes, the Gadsden Purchase, 1853.
Yes. So that was Mexico, but then we got this little bit, which added a little bit more to Arizona and New Mexico, the bottom southern part. And the deal was, you see, there was this railroad they wanted to build through there.
To make a
And
train.
the Mexicans basically said, all right, we'll let you have it if you build the railroad, because we could both benefit from that railroad. So that was the deal. And so it was done. We got a little bit more. Now, back in 1848, while the Mexican War is going on, guess what else is happening at the same time? See, the Mexican War starts in 1846. 2 years later is 1848. Something else is happening while that's happening down there. Something called
The gold rush
The
in
gold
California, the
Yeah.
49ers.
You're exactly right. And so in 1848, this California gold rush started. Way back, there was a man named John Sutter who had this ranch, and he had hired worker working for him, and he thought he saw what were little flakes of gold. And so he gathered some, he showed them to John Sutter because he was working for him. And Sutter looked at those flakes and he studied them. And as his worker, his name was James Marshall, he was watching what he was doing. He finally whispered to him, you know what he said? He said, "You found pure gold, pure gold. But don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone, for if you do, the land will be destroyed because everyone from everywhere will come here. And we won't get what we want." Well, guess what? Apparently he didn't keep the secret very well, because the news spread, and pretty soon all these people were coming. Gold had been found in California. Go to California and get rich. Before long, the whole United States had heard about exciting news going on in California, and many people from the north, the south, the east left all their jobs and just headed for California. We're going to go get rich. Well, in those days, such a trip was long and dangerous. Remember all the covered wagons and if you went all the way from the East Coast,
That'd be pretty bad.
maybe you were just Midwest, and you still had to go quite a ways. It was way on the other side by the Pacific Ocean. Well, there were mountains, there were deserts, there were warlike Indians to deal with, Native American, still there too, right? Gold, 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 gold was the only thing they thought about. And so was their desire. You know what they had? They had a disease.
They had a disease?
They got a disease. You know what the name of that disease is?
Chicken pox.
Nope. It's called gold. It's called gold fever.
Oh,
And
what?
they can't control themselves. They just want gold. They can't think of anything else. It's not like, it's not a real disease in the body, but it's a disease. And
They
so,
just can't get it out.
no, they just can't stop thinking of gold. And what's really called is covetousness. What's really called is greed.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
I was about to say they were gonna get greedy. Especially, it's hard to find gold because you need to know where to go in order to find the gold, and like ask people like if they found it, where at, because it's not that easy. It's really not.
It isn't. In fact, these gold miners went through there, and that's true. You know, there wasn't a ton of gold found. There was gold there, but look, most people didn't get rich. And so, but the ones that were these gold miners and heading for California, what did they end up calling them? They had this nickname for them.
49ers.
The 49ers. Why? Because in 1848 it was discovered, but by the time most of them got there, it was 1849. And so the 49ers is what they were called. And of course, this whole movement was known as the Gold Rush. The Gold Rush. They were rushing to get gold and to get rich.
Imagine how much people you'd see like on the path to California. Like you see a whole wagon, and then you ask where they're going, and they're gonna say, "Well, there's a gold rush in California. We're going."
That's right.
And then you just see a bunch of other people.
I know it. It would really be something to see if you had been back there. And so, well, John Sutter's words, thousands of greedy, invited gold miners swarmed over the land. These men cared nothing about the crops that John Sutter had planted. They're running over all the land, crushing down his crops he's grown on his ranch, and animals he was raising. So this farm was basically ruined because of this. What seemed like a good thing ended up not so good for him. So what happened in the town? Once enough people got there, there was a town in this gold mining town. Towns grew rapidly as lots of people went there, right? You can imagine how fast a town would grow. And they made their way to California, and they found that life was not easy in this gold. You know what happened? Storekeepers started demanding that their goods be paid for in gold dust rather than money.
Oh, now that's just a ripoff right there, because no one is able to afford gold. That's just way too hard. Even if like the smartest person in the world even knows how to get the gold and knows where to go, he's still not gonna find a nugget of gold. It's most likely that you're not gonna find a nugget of gold. Just a few like flakes is probably what you'll find, but not a nugget. And I've seen nuggets before, even a whole bar, and they are expensive. They're worth millions for just one bar.
The price of gold keeps going up, doesn't it?
Yes,
It's definitely thousands for just an ounce, right? So depending on how big that gold bar is, you're right. It's going to be a lot of money. Well, so here's what the shopkeepers started doing. They started charging more money for their stuff, assuming everyone had gold, and saying, okay, 1 egg costs as much as 50 cents to $1, and 1 pound of flour often would cost more than $1 worth of gold. Now, remember, back then, that was a ton of money.
No one had money back then.
So with price,
The whole world was poor almost.
so what happened was the shopkeepers, they were the ones that ended up getting rich out of this. Not necessarily the miners, because they still had to eat, right? They still had to get supplies, and it was just bad. It reminds me of going to some of these ball games or other places, or an amusement park where they charge a whole lot of money because they know you're stuck there, so they'll charge you more for it. You know what I mean? And they'll charge you more than it's really worth. But that happened there. So it's been going on a long time, hasn't it? So some people were starting to steal and even kill to get more gold. That was pretty evil.
And just greedy too, because
Yeah.
that's like also bad, because like money will not buy you happiness. No, it won't. It'll just cause more problems.
Mhm. And part of the problem was California still wasn't a state. And so there were just people out there. There was little law, there was just people out there, and there wasn't like a police force or anything like that. So there was not a lot to protect people from people with guns and other things. Well, lumber was so expensive that many men chose to live in tents. That's how expensive the lumber was that they were charging. So they set up a tent, and that's exactly what they did. They set up, let's see, lumber was that expensive. You see what I'm talking about?
There's an intercom
Yeah,
talking to you.
yeah, I'll have to, I'm gonna call them back when we're done, okay?
And also, the people that they didn't know is, I just remembered this,
Mhm.
but there is something that is not close to the price of gold, but it'll get you money if only you have a pickaxe. And that's finding silver, copper, graphite, and other things, because those will definitely get you some money, especially amethyst and sapphire and all these other things.
Yes, those jewels.
Rubies and emeralds and diamonds too.
Gems, yes. So you're gonna highlight lumber was so expensive. That's in your book. And also, once all the gold was found, there was no more gold left, because eventually all the gold was found, there wasn't any gold left. What happened to all these towns that were booming with people? There's no more gold, all the people left. Well, if there aren't any people left, all these buildings, and then no one was there to live in.
They're
So
called ghost towns.
yes, they all left, and there was just nothing there. And years later, people go through there, and there's these buildings falling apart. No one's there. A ghost town.
And then there's just tumbleweed, just tumbling its way down.
Yes, yes. So we're almost done. And let's finish this because I think someone needs me. California becomes a state in what year?
Honestly,
What year?
I don't
Wait,
know.
look at this. 1850.
18.
1850.
Okay.
And finally, after that happened, our country finally became literally from sea to shining sea, right? Because think of North Carolina's on the East Coast, California's on the West Coast, and now we had states all the way in between, from one ocean all the way to the other. So that's why we call it from sea to shining sea, right? As the song goes. You know that song?
No, but I have something to tell you. I used to have an amethyst geode before, and I've seen a big geode with like amethyst and all these other things. And like I used to have this little rock with amethyst in it, and it was like this big, like that big.
Really? That's
Yes.
a really good one.
And I had a little other piece. I think I had two pieces, and I had something else, but I found it on the playground at school one day, and somebody must have lost it.
Mhm.
And this was in second grade or third grade, but it was like this silver rock, kind of like this silver, like it had silver on it, but I can't remember what the name was, and I lost it. It
Oh,
could be in my room though,
that's a
somewhere.
big loss, isn't it?
Yeah, it could.
All
Yeah,
right,
it is.
a couple questions and then we'll be done. Are you ready?
Okay.
What was the Mexican War fought over?
Over Texas,
True. What about it? The what between Mexico and Texas?
the border of
Yes, the
Mexico and Texas.
boundary, border or boundary. That's right. And what river forms the boundary line between Mexico and Texas?
The Rio Grande.
Yes, yes. Sometimes you'll hear Rio Grande and sometimes you hear Rio Grande. Grande is the Spanish way.
Yes.
And then what purchase was made so that a railroad could be built in the Southwest?
The Gadsden Purchase.
You're exactly right.
Yes.
Excellent. You remembered, you learned a lot. Did you even have your book? Or are you just listening?
No.
All right, good for you. And remember, chapter checkup questions 11 through 17 on page 145 is what you all should do. And there's 34 questions. So if anyone wanted to get ahead, there's 34 chapter checkup questions. So when we
Yeah,
get
because I already did the first 11.
okay, there's 34 in all.
And I did my science.
All right, well, you did a great job. Any questions? And that will conclude our history for this section. And you all can read it and learn.
Honestly, no. I think I get the whole history part about. I love the part about the 49ers. It's just like how the people rushed to California
Mhm.
and like tried to find the gold, but they actually didn't. They ended up getting nothing but flakes, and how this is kind of like cool because it's like telling you not to be greedy also at the same time, because sometimes it'll end up bad if you have too much of the good stuff. Remember, like you said, too much good stuff can actually get you.
Yes, that's a good point you brought up. There's a moral lesson to this history lesson, isn't there?
Yes.
Yes, greed is bad. Well, I'm going to end there. You take care and I will see you later. All right.
Bye.
Bye.